You've been defending yourself your whole life and you didn't even notice how much it was costing you. Every time someone questioned your character, you rushed to explain. Every time someone accused you of something, you felt that hot spike in your chest and your mouth opened before your mind caught up. You poured out reasons, context, nuance, evidence. And the whole time you thought you were being smart. You thought you were setting the record straight. You thought the truth would speak for itself if you just gave it enough words. But here is what actually happened. Every sentence you offered in your own defense was a brick you handed them to build a wall around you. Every explanation was a micro-surrender. And every time you walked away from one of those conversations feeling drained, feeling like you somehow lost ground even though you were right, that feeling was not paranoia. That feeling was accurate. You were losing. You have been losing this way your entire life without once questioning the instinct. Here is the idea I want you to hold on to for the next half hour. The moment you start explaining yourself, you have already lost. Defending is losing. Not because you are wrong, but because the act of defense is itself an admission that the other person holds the authority to put you on trial. Think about that. When you defend, you are unconsciously saying, I accept that you are the judge and I am the defendant. I accept that your accusation carries enough weight that I must respond to it. I accept that my reputation, my character, my truth is something I must prove to you. And that acceptance, that silent structural surrender, is the real defeat. Not the accusation. The accusation is just noise. The defeat is in your posture. Machiavelli understood this at a level most people never reach. He saw that power is not about being right. Power is about who controls the frame. Who sets the terms. Who decides who is on trial. And the person who rushes to defend themselves has just handed that decision to someone else. They have let the attacker choose the battlefield, choose the rules, and choose what must be proven. That is not strategy. That is reflex. And reflex is the enemy of power. So here is what we are going to do. I am going to walk you through 7 principles that will permanently change how you handle conflict, accusation, and manipulation. Each one is a shift in posture, not a trick. Each one moves you from defense to offense, from explaining to commanding, from the defendant's chair to the judge's bench. By the end, you will understand something that terrifies manipulators. You will understand that the person who never defends themselves is the person who cannot be controlled. Let us begin. Number 1. Defense is a confession of guilt you never meant to make. This is the hardest one to accept because it strikes at something deeply wired into you. You were taught that innocent people explain themselves. That transparency is proof of integrity. That if you have nothing to hide, you should have no problem laying it all out. And that logic sounds airtight until you watch what actually happens in a room when someone starts defending themselves. The moment you shift into explanation mode, something changes in how people perceive you. Your voice might go slightly higher. Your sentences might get longer. You might start over-explaining, adding details nobody asked for, circling back to make sure they understood. And every one of those behaviors is read the same way by the human brain. Guilt. Insecurity. Weakness. This is not fair. I know it is not fair. An innocent person who explains themselves thoroughly should be believed. But we are not talking about fairness. We are talking about power. And power does not care about fairness. Power cares about perception. And perception is ruthless. When you defend, people do not hear your words. They hear your energy. And your energy is saying, I am worried you might not believe me. I need you to believe me. Your acceptance matters to me. That is the energy of someone who has already conceded the higher ground. Think about the last time someone accused you of something. Maybe it was at work. Maybe it was in a relationship. Maybe it was something petty, something a friend implied about your character. Remember that impulse. That urge to immediately set the record straight. Now imagine instead that you had just looked at them. Calmly. Quietly. And said nothing for a few seconds. Just let the accusation sit in the air like a bad smell. Watch what happens to the other person when you do that. They get uncomfortable. They start adding to their accusation. They start over-explaining their own position. Because here is the secret nobody told you. The person who makes an accusation also feels the pressure to justify it. They just expect you to relieve that pressure by defending yourself. When you do not, the pressure stays with them. And now they are the one who looks like they have something to prove. Defense is a confession. Not of the thing you were accused of, but of something deeper. A confession that you need their approval. That their opinion of you has power over you. And that is the real guilt. The guilt of giving your power away. Number 2. The question is never about you. It is about them. When someone attacks you, your entire focus narrows to the content of the attack. What did they say? Is it true? How do I disprove it? What evidence do I have? You go into problem-solving mode. You treat the accusation like a math equation that needs solving. But the accusation is not a math equation. It is a window. A window into the person making it. Every accusation someone levels at you is telling you something about their own psychology. Their own fears. Their own insecurities. Their own agenda. When a coworker implies you are not pulling your weight, that accusation is not really about your productivity. It is about their fear of being seen as insufficient, which they manage by redirecting attention. When a partner accuses you of being distant, it is often not about your distance. It is about their anxiety about abandonment, which they convert into blame because blame is easier than vulnerability. When someone calls you selfish, it usually means you did something that did not serve their interests, and they are trying to shame you back into alignment. The strategic mind does not absorb the accusation. The strategic mind reads it. You stop hearing the content and start hearing the motive. Why this accusation? Why now? Why in this way? What are they trying to accomplish? What do they need from you? What fear is driving this? When you shift your attention from what they said to why they said it, something extraordinary happens. You stop being the subject of the conversation. They become the subject. And now you are not defending. You are analyzing. And the person being analyzed is always in the weaker position. This is why the most powerful response to an accusation is almost never a denial. It is a question. Not a defensive question. A probing question. A question that turns the spotlight back on them. What do you mean by that? That is interesting. What makes you say that? How did you come to that conclusion? These sound simple. They are devastating. Because they force the attacker to explain themselves. To articulate their reasoning. To expose their logic. And most of the time, their logic is not as solid as their accusation sounded. The accusation was designed to put you on the back foot. The question puts them on the back foot. And now the conversation has flipped. The question is never about you. It is about them. And when you understand that, accusations stop being threats. They become intelligence. Every attack becomes a data point about the person attacking you. And data is power. Number 3. Silence is the weapon they cannot counter. Of all the tools available to you in a conflict, silence is the one that makes people the most uncomfortable. Not your silence. Theirs. When you go quiet, the other person cannot stand it. There is something about the absence of response that creates a vacuum, and human beings will do almost anything to fill a conversational vacuum. They will keep talking. They will add details. They will soften their position. They will backtrack. They will reveal things they had no intention of revealing. All because you refuse to fill the space for them. Most people treat silence as the absence of communication. Strategic people treat silence as the most aggressive form of communication. It says, I am not rattled. I am not rushing. I am not performing for you. I am sitting here, completely comfortable, while you squirm. That is dominance. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind. The kind that makes the other person feel like they are talking too much, like they are overplaying their hand, like they misjudged the situation entirely. Here is how this works in practice. Someone makes an accusation. Or asks a loaded question. Or makes a passive-aggressive comment designed to bait you. And instead of responding, you pause. You look at them. You let 2 or 3 seconds stretch into 5 or 6. You do not look angry. You do not look hurt. You look calm. Unbothered. Like you are waiting for them to say something worth responding to. And what happens almost every single time is that they start talking again. They fill the silence. They expand on their point. They reveal more than they planned. They start arguing with themselves while you sit there and collect information. Silence works because it refuses to participate in the script the other person wrote. They had a plan. Accuse you. Watch you react. Use your reaction against you. Your silence breaks the plan. Now they are in uncharted territory. They do not know what you are thinking. They do not know if you are angry or amused or dismissive. And that uncertainty is terrifying to someone who was counting on predictability. Marcus Aurelius carried this kind of silence like armor. Not the silence of fear. The silence of someone who has decided that their inner peace is not up for negotiation. Who has decided that no external event, no accusation, no slight is worth disturbing the composure within. That stoic silence is not passivity. It is the most active thing in the room. It is a force. And the people around you will feel it even if they cannot name it. They will know, instinctively, that something about you is different. That the usual levers do not work on you. That the buttons they are used to pressing do not produce the response they expected. And that realization, that quiet recognition that you cannot be provoked, is worth more than any clever comeback. Silence is the weapon they cannot counter because you cannot counter what is not there. You cannot argue with nothing. You cannot defeat someone who refuses to enter the fight on your terms. Number 4. Calibrated questions turn their accusation into their burden. There is a specific kind of question that does something most people do not realize questions can do. It does not seek information. It transfers burden. A calibrated question is one that cannot be answered with a yes or no. It forces the other person to think. To articulate. To expose. And when someone has just accused you of something, the calibrated question is your single most powerful move. Here is the principle. When someone says, "You always do this," or "You are being difficult," or "I cannot trust you," the natural response is to deny. I do not always do that. I am not being difficult. You can trust me. And every one of those denials sounds exactly like what a guilty person would say. But a calibrated question does something entirely different. It says, okay, you have made a claim. Now prove it. Not aggressively. Not defensively. Curiously. Calmly. With genuine interest. What specifically did I do that made you feel that way? How did you arrive at that conclusion? What would need to change for you to feel differently? These questions are not defensive. They are surgical. They take the accusation and hand it back to the accuser as a problem to solve. You said I am untrustworthy. Fine. What evidence do you have? What pattern have you observed? What specific behaviors are you referring to? And now they have to do the work. They have to build a case. They have to articulate reasoning that, in most cases, they never actually thought through. Because most accusations are not the result of careful analysis. They are emotional reactions dressed up as judgments. And when you force someone to undress them, what is underneath is usually thin. There is a critical detail here. Never ask why. Why questions trigger defensiveness. They feel like accusations in return. Why did you say that sounds like an attack? What led you to that conclusion sounds like an invitation. The difference is enormous. Why puts people on guard? What and how put people in a mode of explanation? And explanation is vulnerability. Every time someone explains themselves, they reveal their assumptions, their logic, their emotional state. And all of that is information you can use. Calibrated questions do something else too. They buy you time. While the other person is constructing their answer, you are observing. You are calibrating your own response. You are deciding whether this person is a threat, a nuisance, or an opportunity. You are moving from reaction to strategy. And that shift, from reacting to strategizing, is the shift that separates people who get manipulated from people who do not. Turn their accusation into their burden. Make them prove what they claimed. And watch how quickly most accusations collapse under the weight of their own emptiness. Number 5. Never justify. Never explain. Appear to simply not care. There is a social cost to explaining yourself that nobody talks about. Every time you justify your choices, your behavior, your words, you are teaching the people around you something. You are teaching them that you are accountable to them. That they are entitled to an explanation. That your decisions require their approval. And once you teach them that, you cannot unteach it. They will expect it every time. They will demand it. And when you eventually refuse, they will treat your refusal as proof that something is wrong. Baltasar Gracian understood this deeply. He observed that the person who justifies himself immediately diminishes himself. Not because justification is inherently wrong, but because it signals that your self-worth is dependent on being understood. And a person whose self-worth is dependent on being understood is a person who can be controlled by anyone who refuses to understand them. Think about that for a moment. If you need people to understand you in order to feel okay about yourself, then anyone who withholds understanding has power over you. All they have to do is act confused, act skeptical, act disapproving, and you will rush to explain harder. You will twist yourself into knots trying to make them see your side. And they will sit back and watch you do it, knowing that they control your emotional state simply by choosing not to get it. The strategic response is to appear not to care. Not to be cold. Not to be cruel. Simply to be indifferent to whether they understand. This is enormously difficult because it goes against your deepest social instincts. You are wired to want to be understood. You are wired to want consensus. You are wired to feel that if someone misunderstands you, it is a problem you must solve. But the person who has mastered themselves has decided that being understood is a preference, not a need. They would prefer it. But they do not require it. And that preference versus need distinction is everything. When you do not justify yourself, people fill in the blanks. And here is the interesting part. What they fill in is almost always more impressive, more intimidating, more powerful than anything you could have said. Because when you explain, you give them the real you, which is complicated and messy and human. When you stay silent, they have to imagine. And what they imagine is usually a version of you that is more calculated, more in control, more dangerous than you actually are. Your silence becomes their speculation. And their speculation becomes your reputation. Never justify. Never explain. And watch how quickly people start treating your decisions as final. Watch how they stop questioning you. Not because you have proven yourself right, but because you have made questioning you expensive. You have made it uncomfortable. You have made it clear that questions will not be rewarded with explanations. They will be rewarded with silence. And silence is expensive. Number 6. The counterattack is always stronger than the first strike. Here is something that martial artists have known for centuries and that most people in everyday conflict completely miss. The counterattack is more powerful than the initial attack. Always. Because the initial attack is a guess. It is committed energy directed at where the attacker thinks you are. The counterattack is a response. It is directed at where the attacker actually is, because they have just revealed their position by striking. When someone attacks you in conversation, they are committing. They are putting energy behind a specific claim, a specific angle, a specific strategy. And in that moment, they are exposed. They have shown you what they care about, what they fear, what they want. They have shown you their position. And your counterattack, when it comes, should not address their claim. It should address their position. Most people counter the claim. You say I am selfish, I say no I am not, here are all the generous things I have done. That is countering the claim. It is weak because it keeps you in their frame. Countering the position is different. You say I am selfish. I look at you and I say, that is an interesting thing to say to someone who has never asked you for anything. What does it say about you that you feel the need to call me selfish right now? That is a counterattack. It does not deny the accusation. It questions the accuser. It uses their own momentum against them. The counterattack is stronger because it carries the weight of their energy plus yours. They came at you with force. You redirect that force. You do not absorb it. You do not block it. You redirect it. And the harder they pushed, the harder the counter lands. This is why the most aggressive attackers are the easiest to counter. They overcommit. They pour everything into the accusation because they expect you to fold. And when you do not fold, when you redirect instead, they have nothing left. They are off balance. They are exposed. And they are suddenly the one who looks like they have something to defend. There is a stoic dimension to this that matters. The counterattack is not rage. It is not fury. It is not emotional. It is calculated. Marcus Aurelius would have recognized it instantly. The Stoic does not react emotionally. The Stoic observes, calculates, and acts with precision. The counterattack is surgical. It is the minimum force necessary, applied at the exact right point, to achieve the maximum effect. It is not about hurting the other person. It is about demonstrating that attacking you was a miscalculation, and that the cost of that miscalculation is higher than they expected. The counterattack is always stronger than the first strike. But only if you have the discipline to wait for it. Only if you can resist the urge to defend in the moment. Only if you can absorb the initial blow without flinching, read the attacker's position, and then respond with something they did not prepare for. That discipline is rare. And that is exactly why it is so powerful. Number 7. The shift from I need to clear my name to you need to prove your claim. This is the principle that ties everything together. This is the psychological shift that changes everything about how you move through the world. And it is a shift, not a technique. It is a change in how you see yourself in relation to other people. Most people walk through life with an unconscious assumption. The assumption is that their reputation, their character, their standing in a group, is something that belongs to other people. Something that is granted to them by consensus and can be revoked at any time. And because they believe this, they live in a constant low-grade state of defensiveness. They are always ready to explain. Always ready to justify. Always ready to prove that they deserve to be where they are. And every time someone challenges them, that defensiveness spikes and they go into performance mode. The shift is this. Your character does not belong to them. It belongs to you. Your reputation is not a democratic process. It is not something that gets voted on. It is not something that can be revoked because someone made a convincing accusation. Your character is a fact about you that exists independent of whether anyone recognizes it. And because it exists independent of their recognition, you do not need to prove it. You simply need to live it. When you internalize this, the entire dynamic changes. Someone makes an accusation. And instead of thinking, I need to clear my name, you think, you need to prove your claim. That is not a thought you perform. It is a posture you inhabit. And people can feel it. They can feel that you are not worried. They can feel that you are not rushing. They can feel that you are not performing. And that feeling, that sense that you are unbothered by their accusation, is more persuasive than any explanation you could have offered. This shift terrifies manipulators. Manipulators rely on your need to be seen as good. They rely on your reflex to defend. They rely on the fact that if they push the right button, you will scramble to prove them wrong. And when you do not scramble, when you do not defend, when you simply look at them as if to say, go ahead, make your case, they panic. Because they were not prepared to make a case. They were prepared to watch you react. And without your reaction, they have nothing. The person who has made this shift is untouchable in a way that no technique can replicate. Because the untouchability is not in what they say. It is in what they no longer need. They no longer need to be understood. They no longer need to be believed. They no longer need to be approved of. And a person who does not need those things cannot be controlled by the threat of withholding them. This is the ruthless art Machiavelli perfected. Not cruelty. Not manipulation for its own sake. The discipline of refusing to hand your power to anyone who demands it. The understanding that the person who needs nothing from the room controls the room. And the recognition that every defense you have ever mounted was a moment you chose their judgment over your own sovereignty. The shift from I need to clear my name to you need to prove your claim is the single most important psychological transition you can make. It changes every conversation. It changes every relationship. It changes how you walk into a room and how you leave it. And once you have made it, you cannot go back. Because once you have felt what it is like to sit in the judge's chair instead of the defendant's chair, you will never voluntarily give that seat up again. So let me bring this back to where we started. The moment you start explaining yourself, you have already lost. Not because you are wrong. Because you have accepted a frame in which you are on trial. And that acceptance is the only thing that gives an accusation its power. Every time you have defended yourself, you were not protecting your reputation. You were protecting their right to judge you. Every explanation you offered was a vote against your own authority. Every justification was a brick in a prison you were building around yourself, a prison with bars made of other people's opinions. You have been doing this your whole life. In small ways and large ways. With friends who implied you were not loyal enough. With partners who accused you of not caring. With colleagues who questioned your competence. With strangers online who misread you and made you feel the need to correct them. And every single time, you walked away feeling worse. Not because the truth was inadequate, but because you treated the truth as something that needed their stamp of approval. Stop. Stop doing this. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Right now. The next time someone accuses you of something, do not explain. Do not justify. Do not defend. Look at them. Let the silence hang. Ask them a question that forces them to articulate their own position. And then watch them squirm while they try to build a case they never expected to have to build. This is not about being cold. This is not about being cruel. This is about reclaiming something that has always belonged to you. Your authority over your own character. Your right to exist without proving yourself to anyone who demands it. Your freedom from the tyranny of other people's opinions. Machiavelli saw that the person who controls the frame controls the outcome. And the frame is controlled by the person who does not flinch. Who does not rush. Who does not perform. Who sits in calm, stoic stillness while the other person unravels. That is the ruthless art Machiavelli perfected. And now it is yours. You will lose people who were used to your defensiveness. You will confuse people who were used to your compliance. You will unsettle people who were used to being able to provoke you. Good. Let them be unsettled. Let them be confused. Let them go. The people who remain will respect you in a way that no amount of explaining could ever earn. Because respect is not given to people who ask for it. Respect is given to people who do not need it. So here is what I want you to do. Right now, not tomorrow. Think of one relationship in your life where you have been defending yourself. One person who has been making accusations and watching you scramble. One situation where you have been pouring energy into being understood by someone who has no intention of understanding you. And decide, right now, that the next time they come at you, you will not defend. You will not explain. You will turn it back on them. You will make them defend their attack. And you will sit in silence while they try. If you have understood what I have shared with you today, go to the comments and write these 4 words. I am untouchable. Not because you are arrogant. Because you have decided to be. Because the decision itself is what makes it true. The moment you stop defending yourself is the moment you become someone who cannot be touched by accusations. And that moment can be right now. The choice has always been yours. Stop explaining. Start commanding. And never defend yourself again.